Hi, boys and girls. Today's story is The Wild Toboggan Ride. The authors are Suzan, Reid, and Eugenie Fernandes. Let's find out about the wild toboggan ride. A toboggan, boys and girls, is just like a sled, another word for a sled. Toboggans might be a little bit bigger than a sled, but let's find out about our story. We can see that these children on the cover of our story are having so much fun, and they look like it looks like a little girl with her father. So let's find out about the wild toboggan ride. Boys and girls, we can see in our picture that the children are having a great day playing in the snow, making snowmen, sledding. Let's find out what else is happening. The afternoon was crisp and quiet. Nicki pulled her long toboggan to the top of the hill where Grandpa Dan was standing, tapping his boot in the snow. "Come along," he frowned. "I'm chilled to the bone. Fiddlesticks to snow." "Please, Grandpa Dan, one more ride," pleaded Nicki. So the man in the cover of our story is her grandpa, and this is Nicki, his granddaughter. "Oh, fiddlesticks," sniffed Grandpa Dan. "Nasty weather. Will you push me, please?" Nicki begged. "Phooey, this is the last one." Grandpa Dan leaned over to give Nicki a tiny push on her long toboggan. As he bent over, he stepped on his extra long scarf and his foot slipped. Bump, oomp, crash! Grandpa Dan landed on the back of the long toboggan with Nicki in his lap. Oh my goodness, and it looks like they are going down the hill. Yahoo! Yelled Nicki. "Good grief," gasped Grandpa Dan. "How do you steer this thing?" Down the hill they went, gathering speed, with Grandpa Dan's extra long scarf flapping in the wind. "Yahoo!" Nicki yelled again. They reached the bottom of the hill and the toboggan swerved left. "Whoa," sputtered Grandpa Dan from behind his extra long scarf. "I can't see a thing." Bump, oomph, crash. The baker crossing the street landed on top of Grandpa Dan and Nicki. "Good grief, move up," yelled Grandpa Dan. "What on earth are you doing, Dan?" asked the baker. "Trying to steer this confounded contraption. Move your head. I can't see a thing." Along the street zoomed Grandpa Dan, Nicki, and the baker, all on the long toboggan. So now they've got, it looks like maybe more 3 people on the toboggan. 1, 2, 3. Bump, oomp, crash! The barber, locking up his shop, landed on top of the baker. "Heavens, find your spot," said the baker. "Quiet down up there. I can't see a thing," yelled Grandpa Dan. Along the street and into the park went Grandpa Dan, Nicki, the baker, and the barber, all on the long toboggan. So now they have 4 people on the toboggan ride. 4 people. 1, 2, 3, 4. The baker, the barber, Grandpa Dan, and Nicki. 4 people. Bump, crash! The police chief on his way home from work landed on top of the barber. Get your foot off my head, said the barber. Wowza, Dan! Do you have a license for this thing? Asked the police chief. Move up. We're getting squished back here, called the baker. Through the park whizzed Grandpa, Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, and the police chief, all on the long toboggan. So now we have Grandpa, Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, and the police chief. How many people is that, boys and girls? It looks like 5. Crash! The mail carrier with her bag of letters landed on top of the police chief. Sorry, Chief, said the mail carrier. Get your mail bag off my lap and sit down, said the police chief. This is my spot. Good grief, Grandpa Dan yelled, with everybody dancing around up there. I can't see a thing. Out of the park and onto the frozen lake went Grandpa Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, the police chief, and the mail carrier, all on the long toboggan. So now, how many people do we have, boys and girls? We have Grandpa Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, the police chief, and the mail carrier. And that's 6 people. 6. Ooh, they are all on the toboggan. Bump, crash. A hockey player landed on top of the mail carrier. Penalty, yelled the hockey player. Interference. Oh, be quiet, said the mail carrier. Everybody, hold on, said Grandpa Dan. Yahoo, said Nicki. Over the ice and straight toward a snowbank went Grandpa Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, the police chief, the mail carrier, and now the hockey player. So now, boys and girls, Grandpa Dan, Nicki, the baker, the barber, the police chief, the mail carrier, the hockey player. 7 people, boys and girls, all on that toboggan. If we count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're all stuck on that toboggan. Bump, crash! The toboggan flew into the snowbank, and suddenly bodies were tumbling in every direction. Hats, gloves, and scarves soared through the air. Grandpa Dan and Nicki landed in a bush. The baker and the barber landed in a tree. The police chief and the mail carrier and the hockey player landed on a garbage can. They are just flying all over. For a moment, nobody moved. Everything was quiet. Then Grandpa Dan and Nicki crawled out of the bushes. The baker and the barber climbed out of the tree. The police chief, the mail carrier, and the hockey player jumped out of the garbage can. Grandpa Dan grabbed the toboggan and began to run across the ice, his extra long scarf flapping behind him. The baker, the barber, and the police chief, the mail carrier, and the hockey player looked at each other. Then they started running too. Everybody's running. Wait, Grandpa Dan, where are you going? Yelled Nicki. If we hurry, he called back, we can get in one more ride before dark. So it looks like Grandpa Dan liked it. And then this looks like Nicki was happy about it. And look at the dog. They're all happy. Boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed our story, The Wild Toboggan Ride.